good morning to Puan Rashida. My name is Madurita and my metric card number is 10 DAT 19F1054.
Good morning, madam. My name is Sasmita Kaligasaram, number metric 10 DAT 19F1046.
A very good morning to Madam Rashida. I'm Gatu, daughter of Telma from class DAT4A. My metric card number is 10 DAT1 and F105.
Namaste Kira Puan, nama saya Vishani Morgan. Metric card nama saya ialah 10 DAT 19F1038.
Today we'll be presenting our tutorial answer. The first question will be give 3 importance of audit documentation, where audit report is helpful to develop the audit which was done according to generally recognized accounting principles. Second one will be audit documentation is a proof for supporting the pleasure, the closure molded and imparted by the auditor in the auditor's report. Third one will be audit documentation helps the audit to structure and plan for the audit. And lastly, to provide evidence the underlying accounting records agree or reconcile with the financial statement. Thus, it allows quality control and other reviews to take place or possibly inspection by third parties. Okay, now let us look at the second question. Explain 4 quality of audit working papers. What are the 4 quality of audit working papers? The first one, it should set a clear audit objective, usually in terms of an audit assertion. For an example, to ensure the completeness of trade creditors. Second one, it should fully state the year of prior and, an example, 31st March 2016, so that the working paper is not confused with the documentation belonging to a different year or period. Third one, it should state the full extent of the test. In example, how many items were tested and how this number was determined. This will enable the preparer and any subsequent reviewers to determine the sufficiency of the audit evidence provided by the working paper. The last one, where there is a necessary reference to another working paper, the full reference of the working paper must be given. A statement that details of testing can be found on another working paper is insufficient.
Today I'll be talking on the content of audit working paper. Audit working paper include those papers and documents which consist of detail about account which are under audit. They are the written prior material which an auditor prepares for each audit. They describe accounting information which obtained from client, the method of examination used, conclusion, and financial statement. So those contents of working paper are, firstly with the table of content, second will be the deliverables. Under deliverables, there will be audit report, final financial statement, including with your trial balance. Third will be the letter to the board of directors, include financial state approval minutes. Next will be management letters, other deliverables. The third will be referencing on financial statement. Fourth will be engagement letter, a letter which exists between a client and an owner of the company. Fifth will be a representation letter. Sixth will be audit completion. Under audit completion, there will be completion document, issues memoranda, summaries of significant method, and disclosure checklist. Fifth will be under audit planning. Under audit planning, there will be planning document, planning analysis, maturity calculation, responsibility metrics. 6 will be risk assessment document, including fraud risk assessment. 7 will be assessment on the other areas, planning and work done. Under it will be subsequent events, going concern, compliance with law and regulation, related parties, internal audit function, involvement of specialists, other as required. Next content will be on discussion. The 9th will be correspondence, including email. Under email, there will be entity management, third parties, copy of requirements, list submitted and status, and other correspondence. The 10th will be company incorporation documents and updates. 11th will be the detailed head voice working, and the 12th will be miscellaneous documents. So these are the table of contents for working paper, and that's all from me. Thank you, friend.
Audit sampling and population. In ISA 530 audit sampling, the definition is the application of audit procedures to less than 100% of items within a population of audit relevance such that all sampling units have a chance of selections in order to about the entire population. In other words, the standard regulation that auditor will not ordinarily test all the information available to them because this will be impractical as well as uneconomical. Instead, the auditor will use sampling as an audit technique in order to form their conclusion. The meaning of sampling risk and non-sampling risk. Sampling risk, according to ISA 530 definition, sampling risk as the risk the auditor's conclusion based on a sampling may be different from the conclusion if the entire population was subjected to the same audited procedures. Non-sampling risk, according to ISA 530 definition, non-sampling risk is the risk that the auditors may reach and encourage conclusion not related to the sampling risk. For an example, an auditor draw a conclusion based on a misinterpretation of the audited evidence or a poorly designed auditor procedures. How both sampling risk reduce the risk. In order to reduce sampling risk, auditor must also take in consideration of the auditors want to achieve. For an example, the population compares sales via website on location sales. On way to overcome sampling risk is the increase the sample size, which means the more items from the population will be included for auditor test. No sampling risk can be reduced to a negligible level through such factors as adequate planning and supervision and proper conduct of a firm's auditor practice.
Is F. The provide in detail three factors that influence the sample size. The first factor is an increase in the extent to which the auditor risk assessment take into account relevant controls. The effect on the sample size is increased. This factor, the more assurance the auditor intends to obtain from the operating effectiveness of control, the lower the auditor assessment of the risk of material misstatement will be, and the larger the sample size will need to be. When the auditor assessment of the risk of material misstatement at the association level includes an expectation of the operating effectiveness of control, the auditor is required to perform test of control. Other things will equal, the greater the reliance the auditor places on the operating effectiveness of control in their misstatement, the greater is the extent of the audited test of control, and therefore the sample size is increased. Second factor is an increase in the tolerable rate of deviation. The effect on this sample size is decreased. The lower the tolerable rate of deviation, the larger the sample size needs to be. The third factor is an increase in the expected rate of the deviation of the population to be tested. For this, FS sample size is increased. The higher the expected rate of the deviation, the larger the sample size needed to be so that the auditor is in this position to make a reasonable estimate of the actual. Next is G question, that is sample selection method that we know are probability sample selection and non-probability selection method. The first is for probability sampling method, that is simple random sampling. In this case, each individual is chosen entirely by chance and each member of the population has an equal chance or probability of being selected. One view of obtaining a random sample is to give each individual in population a number and then use a table of random numbers to decide which individuals to include. For example, if we have a sampling frame of individuals of 1000 and label 0 to 999, choose groups of 3 digits from the random number table to pick your sample. So if the first 3 number from the random number table were 094, select the individual label 94 and so on. Next is systematic sampling. Individuals are selected at regular intervals from the sampling frame. The intervals are chosen to ensure an adequate sample size. If you need a sample size and from a population of a size X, you should select every X individual for the sample. For example, if you want a sample size of 100 from a population 1000, select every 1000 per 100 equals to 10 members of the sampling frame. The last is cluster sampling. In a cluster sample, subgroups of the population are used as the sampling unit rather than individuals. The population is divided into subgroups known as clusters, which are randomly selected to be included in the study. Clusters are usually already defined. For example, individual GP practice or towns could be identified as clusters. In single-stage cluster sampling, all members of the chosen cluster are then included in the study. In two-stage cluster sampling, a selection of individuals from each cluster is then randomly selected for inclusion. Clustering should be taken into account in the analysis. The General Household Survey, which is undertaken annually in England, is a good example of a one-stage cluster sample. All members of the selected households cluster are included in the survey. Next is non-probability sampling method. First is convince sampling. Convince sampling is perhaps the easiest method of sampling because participants are selected based on availability and willingness to take part. Useful results can be obtained, but the results are prone to significant bias because those who volunteer to take part may be different from those who choose not to volunteer. And the sample may not be representative of each characteristic such as age or sex. Not volunteer bias is a risk of the non-probability sampling methods. Second is quanta sampling. This method of sampling is often used by marketing researchers. Interviews are given a quota of subjects of a specific type to obtain to record. For example, an interview might be told to go out and select 20 adult men and 20 adult women, 10 teenage girls and 10 teenage boys so that they could interview them about their television viewing. Ideally, the quotas chosen will proportionally represent the characteristics of the underlying population. The last is judgment or purposive sampling, also known as selective or subjective sampling. These techniques relies on the judgment of the researcher when choosing who to ask to participate. Researchers may implicitly choose a representative sample to suit their needs or specifically approach individuals with certain characteristics. This approach is often used by the media when canvassing the people for opinions and in qualitative research.